Hey, everybody, it's Vanessa Van Dyken, and you're watching the Side podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Side podcast, the show that talks about all things disc golf. From weekend rounds with our mates to the Pro Tour over in the States, we've got you covered, all from an amateur perspective. My name's Rob, and as always, I'm here with my co-host Dale.
Hello, mate. How are you?
Oh, Dale, if I was buzzing any more, I'd be a bumblebee. We have had a fantastic weekend of coverage. It was nail biting all the way through, and we've got an ultimate guest this week. So I'm just looking forward to jumping in. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about what they can expect from this week?
Yes, absolutely, mate. Well, first of all, I need to speak to the listeners because they need to get a bit better at the guest to guest, as there's no right answers this week. But as our intro and our Instagram have told you, we have got Vanessa Van Dyken on the show today. We were very lucky to catch up with her before Waco and to talk about her Pro Tour and how it's going to start. Great interview. One of my favourites we have done. Also, we've got, as I said, another weekend of disc golf to talk about. Waco was windy, and there's a lot of content out there and a lot to discuss.
Absolutely, and we're going to jump straight into that. But first, let's give a quick message from the sponsor of the show. So as always, the Side is sponsored by dischub.co.uk. Disc-Hub, they're a great seller of plastic over here in the UK. I mean, just a disc that I've been throwing personally is the Yeekan crossbow. Now, if you don't know Yeekan, they're doing some cool stuff with their plastic. And this crossbow, I mean, it's essentially a mid-range tilt. And it's crazy. You've thrown it, I've thrown it, and this thing just bombs. So if you're looking to get something slightly different, maybe head over to Discraft to choose your next disc, and make sure you use our code AMSIDE5 for 5% off, which is always a win. And you mentioned about our Guess the Guest competition. It is a rollover week. So the next Guess the Guest will have a dischub.co.uk voucher up for grabs for whoever guesses first. So that's exciting for our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And I think Discub this week said that they're going to up the ante to £15. So it was £10 last week, £15 to the winner, whoever can guess that guest.
So you get one guess right, and that's a new disc, right?
Yeah, incredible, mate. Get yourself a crossbow.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, let's jump into Waco. What a weekend it was. Do you want to kick us off with, do you want to set the scene, Dale? Why don't you set the scene?
The scene was very windy. Conditions weren't ideal out there this weekend. Pros were struggling. Holes were shortened. Headwinds everywhere. But you know, we had a good weekend of disc golf once again. You know, the pros showed us what they can do. Few surprises out there, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely a few interesting names up there. A few names that if you you mentioned them to me a week ago, I would have said, who are they? So some new faces up on the lead cards, which is always refreshing in this wonderful game of disc golf. But it was nail biting. Positions were being switched left, right, and center on both the MPO and on the FPO. I mean, the first place was fairly set in concrete from halfway through round one. So why don't we talk about the winners, and why don't we start with the FPO? Kona Star Panis. I put out on our story on Instagram that she should be called Kona Superstar Panis because she just had the weekend of her life.
Oh, her disc golf was incredible. You know, it wasn't without its faults. I think round two she started with a double bogey, but still managed to really push it. And I think she finished 16 under in the end. And the closest to her was, I think, 2 under. She had a 14-point spin on that. Well, that's a joke. And we are seeing that at the moment. We're seeing the FPO win, and then second or third and fourth was very far behind them. So the packs definitely are split. There's 4 or 5 people out there this year that are really showing us what they can do.
Yeah, and a name that we weren't seeing last season, which we're seeing every single weekend now, is Owen Scoggins. She came second again. She won last week. This is someone that's dangerous. I mean, she's beating out Paige Pierce pretty much week on week. So, I mean, we spoke in the Tour Predictions episode about these eras and these sort of certain players really taking the lead in the FPO, and we were fairly certain that Paige Pierce was here to stay. But you know what? That position at the top of the FPO is looking as unstable as ever.
Yeah, as we saw in Las Vegas, she got the win, but it wasn't without its faults. I mean, round 2, she blew up, absolutely blew up. I think she shot a 75, which shot her right down in the rankings. And then it's always going to be a tough ask when you got Kona going out there shooting six under, 6 under, 4 under. The consistency won there, and Paige is yet to find that consistency this year, I think.
Yeah, I mean, wind is something that's always going to mess up a disc golf, professional or amateur. I mean, I was out there doing field work and 20-mile-an-hour winds this week, and nothing was connecting. So, I feel for these guys, but also they're pros. So you kind of have to think that maybe winds is part of the game. Should it affect the scores as much? So, but that's probably a conversation for a weather episode we have in the future. But talking about people that sort of had a round that kind of blew up in their face, we've got to talk about the MPO. We've got to talk about Eagle McMahon coming off the announcement of being the highest rated player in the world in the game right now, and then throwing arguably one of the worst rounds we saw, first rounds of the weekend, across not just the sort of the lead cards, the televised cards, but anyone. I think he was sitting down in the 70s after day one.
Yeah,
Yes,
77th.
yes, he pulled it back, but he'd buried any chance of coming in cash in that first round. The frustration was there. You saw the frustration was there, and it must be so hard mentally to build back a game once sort of really going under like that.
Yeah, I think once that round has happened, it must be quite hard to reset, because that next round you're starting from behind, and you're going to have to put a round of your life in to get back up to the lead card. I think he finished 7 under in the end, which was 47th, tied with Brodie Smith. Top player in the world is sitting with just over 1,000 rated player. I'm sure we'll see him bounce back, but it wasn't his weekend.
No, for you Brodie fans out there, there's chats on the Brodie Smith fan group on Facebook that it does mean that Brodie Smith, it might be joint best player in the world right now, which I think jumps to quite large conclusions. But you know what?
He's getting there.
People can dream. But let's talk about the winner of the MPO, Nico Locastro. What a weekend he had. And coming off an injury as well now, but listeners might not have seen the coverage or seen his interview, but only weeks prior, he got in a fight with a soda machine at a friend's birthday party and busted his knuckle up. So his putting style was slightly adapted, but it didn't seem to affect him in any way, shape or form. This guy was just on fire from day one, and it was awesome to see.
Yeah, round 1 to round 3.5, he was on fire. He went 7 down round 3, first 9 holes. And then I think we start to see the nerves. It started to see, I saw on the coverage that he looked at his phone. I don't know what he's looked at. Has he looked at UDisc and seen what's going on? Because something changed in his game. He was leaving his approach shots at the edge of circle, which was giving him some difficult putts. And Cal LaVisca was on his heels. And I think had it not been for Nico throwing it in on 17, we could have been going to a playoff, because we got to the 18th hole and Cal LaVisca had no option but to go over. He couldn't lay up. Now that's a par 3. He has to try and make that birdie. And in the end, we see him try and make a birdie putt from 75 to 100 meters, goes in the water, and it's Nico's game. But it could have been very different had that happened.
I think the putt of the weekend and the putt that won the tournament is Nico on 17. If you didn't watch it live, go back and watch Jomo's coverage on this shot. It's a 70+ foot jump putt just to keep that 1 point ahead, and it was glorious. It's one of the best shots we've seen this year. So it was wonderful to see.
Oh, it's brilliant. And I think also on that is his first drive was awful.
Yeah.
He absolutely he grounded it. It skidded up. He had no shot, so he's played it round the corner and landed it 77 meters away, and then he had to make it. Otherwise, as I said, things could have been very different. But fair play to Nico. Good weekend, and it must be a good one to get that notch on the belt.
Absolutely. But you mentioned UDisc and you mentioned the pars being changed. Now, it's not a surprise that some of the hardest holes the players saw this weekend were ones that have been shortened by a stroke. So I think 3 or 4 holes this weekend have had a stroke removed, which obviously is going to make them harder, especially for these returning pros, which are used to a hole being a certain way for the last few years. So they're having to mentally change how they're approaching the hole, the shots they're taking on the hole. It's not business as usual on the ones that have been changed. And we did see that a lot of the mistakes were being made on those newly adapted holes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when Paul Macbeth shot his perfect round 18 down there, we had a par 5, we had a 2 more par 4s. The 18th was a par 4. So it made sense to go over the water to get that eagle. Whereas this week we were seeing people to have to go over the water to make a birdie. Round 2, there was 1 birdie made on 18th, and that was Calvin Heimberg. He was the only person to make a birdie on that hole. Whereas I'm pretty sure the year before we saw that the competition won on that 18th hole. The par 3 with the railings, same thing. That was a par 4 last year. We're seeing people penalised, and you can't get that par if you go out of bounds this time. Otherwise, you have to make an 80-metre throw in. So the course this year was completely different, and I would arguably say up there with Hornets Nest being one of the hardest courses on tour.
For sure, for sure. But I do want to give a shout out to, I mentioned the seasoned touring pros. I want to give a shout out to some of these names that we haven't heard yet, but we saw up on the lead cards. 2 in particular, we've got Gavin Rathburn and Gannon Burr. Now, these 2 guys, like I said at the beginning of this episode, if you mention their names, I wouldn't even know they were disc golfers, let alone playing at the level we saw they could play this weekend. Both young guys, Gannon being 15, he was 1,000 rated at 14. I mean, they were calling him the child prodigy, sponsored by Prodigy. This guy, yes, he croaked a little bit at the end. There's that, and that's just experience, tournament pressure, lots of the things that he's going to build. But this guy, if he keeps progressing the way that we're seeing and know that he can after this weekend's performance, he's world champion in 5 years' time.
Oh, massively. Gannon Burr, I mean, if the commentators don't know who they are, how are we meant to know who they are? They called one of them, I think Ratburn you was talking about, they called him T.O. He was tied 10th, and literally they'd said, oh yeah, T.O. here, because they had literally no idea who this guy was. But I think if you didn't know, you now do. Gannon Burr, 15 years old. When the commentators found out he was 15 years old, they were astonished. Nate Sexton was like, where has this kid come from? Fair play to him. And it's really good, really, really good to see those younger players, fighting through, getting sponsored and making it to these big competitions. Will we see him in the rest of the year? I don't know. It was a Prodigy event. That's probably why he's there. But I'd love to see him up there. Absolutely.
I mean, when I was 15, I couldn't even get my straw in a Capri Sun. That's the kind of level we're dealing with, the kind of difference. So it was just absolutely amazing to see. And then lastly, you've got to address the predictions that we made last week, because we were off the pace. I think both of us had Paige Pierce for the FPO, and like we said, that didn't come in to fruition as we expected, but we did give shout outs, and we said that we'd expect sort of Kona and Owen to potentially have a good weekend. So you know what, we had our fingers a little bit on the pulse there. I'll take some credit for us. Over on the MPO, I had Heimberg, you had Macbeth. I've taken you by a tiny bit. You know what? I'm going to keep going Heimberg, because there hasn't been an event in the last probably 10 events, including the end of last season, where he wasn't up there in that top 10, even top 5. And he is just weekends away. It could be next weekend from taking the top spot. And at this point, it's just, he's teasing me. He's teasing me, Dale. I need to see him take the win.
We talk about our predictions, and every week we do a grip 6 when it allows us. And I won the first week. I think you've won this week, but let's not beat around the bush. Out of, I think, nearly 12,000 picks, we were both in the 11,000th. We didn't do well this week.
Hey man, if I go into the 8,000, I'd be happy. So it's going to come. That's my goal. Next weekend, I'm going to be 8,000. That's going to be my. That's going going to be where I'm going to be sitting. So
First
let's
week
see
I
how
was
we
in a
do.
6,000th, and now I'm like double. So
Oh,
we'll,
and he does love
we'll...
to brag.
Well, if you know me, you know.
Well, that brings us on to the guest this week. I mean, as always, you guys have sat through us rambling about this weekend's Pro Tour event for 15, 20 minutes just to get to the bit that you really want to listen to. And that's the wonderful guest that we've got on for you this week. We had the opportunity to sit down with Vaness Van Dyken and just had a fantastic conversation around how she preps for the game, especially being in quite snowy conditions over the off season, and also how we as a community, especially here in the UK, can build the FPO game. So why don't we jump over to past Rob and past Dale and have a chat with Vanessa. Vanessa, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
No, awesome. It's great to have you, and thank you very much for coming on. It's, as I said, it's awesome you're promoting that UK content, and hopefully we can give you show you what we're doing over here, because I think it's very different to in the States.
Yeah. Yes, I'm super curious about that, like what the scene is like over there.
Well, I was talking about being slightly different. So correct me if I'm wrong, but you're currently in Michigan, where it's extremely cold and snowy.
Oh yeah. It is terribly cold and snowy, and it's hard to do anything really. Like I always go outside and I do a jog outside and I do a hike and everything, but every single day I hate doing it. Or when I lived in San Diego, it was so easy. The sun is so warm and inviting. I felt bad being inside, like I had to be outside. But now it's the opposite, where I'm dragging my heels every time. Sometimes I'll just stare at my shoes, my like running shoes, for like 20 minutes before I like make myself go. But yeah, the cold is super rough.
Motivation is normally the hardest thing. That's the first step. Once you've got that out of the way, you're good to go. Well, maybe you could you have any tips for us then? So in the UK, we're no strangers to cold. And as amateurs, one thing we're constantly fighting is that sort of the hitting the wall when you keep taking your hand out your glove and your hands go numb and you can't feel the disc. Have you got any pro tips about what you do to sort of maybe keep warm, or do you just give up at the moment?
I want to give up at the moment, but actually I've found it's a strange thing, but there's this guy I really like. He's from Netherlands. His name is Wim Hof. And he like, there's a lot of things that he does, but one thing that I use, like if I have to practice my putts outside of the circle, like inside I only have about 23 feet where I can practice my putting. But when I want to practice outside the circle putts, what I do is I'll put like a big bowl of ice water, or I put water in a bowl in the freezer for an hour. And then after an hour, I kind of like crack open the top and it's like ice water. And I put my hand in there for 2 minutes. And it's super painful. But after about 40 seconds, like 40 to 50 seconds, the pain goes away and your body like pumps in a bunch of hormones and adrenaline and stuff into your hand. And after that, I get all the feeling and everything back. Then I go outside and do my outside the circle putts, and it's no problem.
Wow, that's incredible. That is,
it's weird, but it works.
I know exactly who you're talking about. Because my uncle does something similar to that, but he's got basically a massive barrel that's full of water, and every day he'll do 15 minutes ice plunge and sitting there. But you're right, it's all about mind over matter, isn't it?
Well, what's interesting is, okay, maybe at like 30 seconds, you feel like you can't stand it anymore and you have to leave, but you're only like 20 seconds away from the pain going away. So if you just like remind yourself of that, then like your body will pump all the hormones and stuff to make the pain go away, and it kind of accepts the cold. But it's really strange, but that's the only thing that works for me.
I think you've just
Rob, you've got a basket. I challenge you to that.
I will not be doing that, and I think Vanessa's just upgraded disc golf to an extreme sport by the sounds of it, because
it's only your hand. Like you don't need to do your whole body.
Yeah, but I guess you're no stranger to sort of icing your hand? Because obviously you've had a previous injury. Is that on your throwing hand, and is that something you had to do anyway in the recovery process of that?
Yeah, so that's actually why I started doing it, to kind of help with the inflammation for the injury I had in my ring finger. But now it's not really, now I do it just for the cold putting. I don't need to do it anymore since I had surgery. But yeah.
So when you go back to the warmer climates, do you sort of sit outside, warm your hand up, get a suntan before you do your putts, or
No, I
do the
just,
opposite?
no. Yeah, put my hand on fire. No, I don't do anything like that to prepare for the warmer climates other than just like a regular warm up. But it's so much better in the warmer climate. I mean, you don't even have to do that great of a warm up because your muscles are already like warm and ready to go. It's so much nicer.
I just couldn't get motivated, I don't think, to throw my disc into snow to go and pick it up again. I mean, we've just had snow here, and I mean, it's different to where you are. If we get, 3 centimeters of snow, our whole country shuts down.
Oh wow.
But it literally goes to pot. We can't do anything. But we can't play disc golf at the moment anyway because of lockdown. So
Oh really?
yeah, so we're completely locked down. All disc golf courses and golf courses are closed. So we're
Wow.
really relying on that field work. So we had a week last week where we couldn't do anything. And for 2 players that just want to get back out and play, and it was heartbreaking. But next time it
Wow.
snows, I'm going to definitely practice my ice putting.
Yeah, right. That's strange. They don't even like, I mean, we had a lockdown here last April, I believe it was, but you weren't allowed to go to like restaurants or anything like that, or gather at all, only to the grocery store. But you were allowed to do like outdoor physical activity like jogging or hiking, or you could play disc golf.
Yeah, so we're completely done. So we can't go to restaurants. We can't go meet family. All golf courses and disc golf courses are closed. So yeah, we're just waiting for the day that the Prime Minister turns around and says you can go back out, because first thing I'll do is drive down to Rob and we're gonna go and play.
And Vanessa just said something really interesting, which we might want to try, which is warming up. I haven't heard of this before.
No.
I mean, maybe next time we do a round, we'll try this strange warm up technique,
Right?
rather than ripping.
Closest I get to a warm up is forgetting my bag and have to go back and get something. I have to walk back to the car.
That's the warm up. You go jog back to get it.
Yeah, because with you, I suppose you're a professional athlete. You're incredibly good at what you do. So for you, it's that repetitive, and for me, it's turning up and throwing my disc, but there's a lot more on the line for you.
Yeah, I like don't even know where to start because it's like a stressful thing. But I mean, I used to not do warm-ups until I started touring, and you're playing every day. Like you only get 1 day off a week and your body just gets super stiff. And because of the repetitive movement, injuries happen really easily if you're not, and especially when you're touring around, you'll be driving like from some places it's anywhere from like 5 hours till like 15 to the next place. So especially when you do like a 10-hour drive and then you get out of the car to go play around and you're all stiff from being in that like crouched position for several hours, yeah, you have to do a warm up or else you're gonna die.
Yeah, well, I guess there's a lot of stories, I mean, coming from previous and current Pro Tour about how important it is to take care of yourself. I know Simon Lizotte has just sort of announced that he's going to have to postpone his start to the season because his arm isn't 100% still. So I think, I think it's so important to keep looking after yourself out there.
Yeah, I think he said something, I can't remember verbatim, but he had like a little pain in his elbow for most of the season, or if not the whole season. And that's exactly what happened to my finger. I had a little bit of it was painful, but it was maybe on a scale of 1 to 10 about a 3. So I didn't think much of it. And then you keep on playing on it because your pain threshold is high or whatever, and you don't think it's alarming, but those are the most dangerous ones. So if you have any little pain in like your joint or fingers or anything, just rest it.
Well, I wear an elbow brace, which the guys who play with call my Lazot sock. So because he wears the brace itself. So no, absolutely. And I guess the pressure of being a professional, you think, oh, I can push through it. I can get over the pain. But
Yeah.
no, it's great to hear that you're a lot better now, and you're not feeling it as much, hopefully.
Yeah, I learned the hard way.
So one reason we're super excited to have you on the show today is a callback to the first ever episode of the show where we talk about our favorite discs of all time. And Dale very proudly announced, well, why don't you say what your favorite disc is and why you're excited to have Vanessa on?
Well, the disc that changed my disc golfing form and everything was the Meteor. I absolutely adore that disc. If I had to play around with one disc, it'd be
me
that.
Too.
And I was super interested to find out, why that disc, why the Meteor, what was the point where you're like, this is the one I want to put my name on?
Okay, so I mean, I have several favorite discs, but if I had to choose just one disc, like if I were stranded on a desert island and they were like, you can choose one disc golf disc, it would be a mid-range. And I feel like you can do the most with the understable mid because you can throw it on any angle really and control the power to make it fly the way you want. Or you could even do hyzer flips by like putting it on the hyzer angle, but putting a lot of power behind it so it'll flip up and there's just so many things that you can do with it. It's a very versatile disc, any understable mid-range. But I just happen to love the Meteor specifically because it's a beadless mid-range. So I really like that it has a nice clean release off the fingers. And I like the rounded edge. The Comet is a really similar understable mid, but I don't really like the rim or the feel. The profile, like the rim of the disc is kind of pointed or a little bit more sharp, kind of like a rock. And it also has a little bead. So I don't really like the way it feels in my hand. And I just feel like the Meteor is super comfortable and has like a quick, clean release off the hand.
I'm definitely there with you. I don't throw any beaded discs. Again, it's that feel, which it's that extra sort of texture, which it sort of gets into my mind, I guess, when I'm playing. I mean, I have an absolute confession to make, which is I have the biggest hole in my bag, and that's understable mids. I have so many stable mids and just neutral mids, but I've got no understable mids. And I put out an in search of post on the British Facebook group around buying discs. I was like, has anyone got a Meteor? So that's the next thing. The next disc that's going on bag is definitely a Meteor to fill that huge gap. Well, a crater, I guess you could call it if it's going to be filled with a Meteor.
A crater.
No, definitely.
Yeah, and they're nice for sidearm too because they don't have a bead. So you can do a lot. Like if you're kind of pinched in, I don't know if you guys have a lot of wooded courses. Where are you guys
So
from?
we're just outside of London. So actually around London. I know you spoke to our podcast brothers, the guys over In the Chains. They're slightly further north.
Yeah.
So there's a few more wooded courses up there, and definitely actually a lot more courses in the Midlands to north of England. London, a lot of them comes with permissions in parks. So there'll be free to play just activity centers and parks. So a lot of them are a lot more open. So yeah, definitely we're both excited to, when lockdown finishes, get to some other courses to challenge ourselves, maybe some of those narrow corridors that we're yet to really try and throw in.
Yeah, that's when you'll fall in love with the understable mids and just discs in general in the woods. It's so much easier to throw with a lot of hyzer and hit the gap and then let it kind of pop up and do the work for you rather than trying to muscle something overstable down a tunnel.
I really agree with what you said about I know you've said in the past that the Meteor you love because you naturally throw in that hyzer angle. And I think that's something that is the most comfortable sort of release. And I was kind of trying to force over that sort of release on an Annie. But yeah, I absolutely agree. So if you can make the disc do all the work, then it's an absolute no-brainer. So and I think that is what really changed Dale's game, because you were able to just release flat and really get the nice drift to the right.
I didn't have that Annie in my bag. I played Ultimate, and I've got a very, my forearm is my strength. And then when I was watching my friends play, I couldn't throw that Annie flex, and I didn't have that in my bag. And then I got hold of myself with a Meteor, and I started to be able to do it. And it was like, it changed, didn't it, Rob? It really, there's a point I was like, I can do it. And now I could throw, my force or something overstable on that Annie now with power, where I couldn't do before. And it was all because of that one disc.
I do have to blame the Meteor though, because there was definitely the few courses that we played together. There was a couple of holes that I was thinking, oh great, Dale doesn't have a single Anheuser or flip turnover shot. This is where I can get a stroke on him. But now that disc has caused the game to be slightly closer, maybe. So maybe that's the Meteor's fault.
And we're super excited for the 2021, obviously, Tour Series to come out, because last year they weren't very readily available in the UK. So as soon as that comes out, one's going straight in my bag. So 100%.
Yeah, they're supposed to be in this. I keep on putting this off, but I need to ask if I'm allowed to say what the plastic is going to be. But I know what it is going to be, and it's going to make all the Tour Series discs fly a little bit more overstable than they generally would. And I love that, especially for understable disc, because you'll like if you are playing in the woods and you're hitting a lot of trees or whatever, it'll break in a little bit more slowly and have like a more predictable turnover and be like a longer lasting, like nice understable mid, rather than, you ruin it by hitting too many trees and it's just like a rainbow, So
I can relate to the trees.
Yeah.
But if you ever find yourself at a loose end with any Meteors that you don't need anymore, then just know that you have a UK fan that is absolutely loves them.
Yeah. So how long have you guys been playing for?
So I've been playing since the first lockdown last year. So March 23rd, day after my birthday, was when lockdown first started. So I bought myself a starter set from someone online, and then I fell in love with it absolutely ever since. And Rob, you were a little bit just afterwards, weren't you?
Yeah, slightly later. And I think it's important to say that the courses haven't been locked down for all of the lockdowns. So we've got a trilogy of lockdowns in the UK. So we're on number 3 currently, and it's just this third lockdown which is courses fully closed. And disc golf for both me and Dale kind of, I don't know, definitely saved our 2020 because we weren't able to travel and sort of meet in groups with our sort of our friends from before. It was a reason that we were able to get outside, and it was sort of, okay, it's a Sunday, let's get out and play disc golf once a week. And it really sort of gave us a lot to do. And well, it's now gone to the point where we've started this podcast because we wanted to sort of take this love of the game to the next level and share a lot of things with other people. So yeah, we're definitely new. That's why it's the AM side. We don't claim to be pros in any perspective. But as I said, I couldn't think of a better guest than the amateur world champion or previous world champion. So you're clear.
Right?
You're the spokesman for the amateurs.
I understand. Yeah. I think it's really cool that you guys are doing that, because most people are going to connect with you rather than or throw more like you rather than they would like Paul Macbeth or something. So your input is really important, because if a disc flies well for you, it's probably closer to what it would fly like for them, rather than if Paul Macbeth is recommending like his favorite super overstable distance
exactly
driver.
That. And it's when they say about super overstable distance drivers. So let's go for the force. I've recently put a force in my bag. There is one purpose only. It is my skip disc. So I need to skip something fast that skips. Paul Macbeth's out there throwing it on a hyzer. It's flipping. And I'm like, there's no way on earth I'm going to be able to do that.
That is so funny. I also use the force for the same thing, like for low ceiling, big skips. And that's so funny. I remember, I think Waco last year, he was in I don't know if it was a playoff, but it was on hole 18 and Paul had to like birdie the hole at Waco to maybe tie or win the tournament. I can't remember. And it was super windy, and he threw a force, which is crazy overstable for us mortals. But when he threw it, it flipped and went OB or something. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's just so crazy. That would never happen to me.
No,
But
you're right.
yeah.
Watching them do it and us do it is good. But even watching yourself, you know, I'd never be able to throw a disc as well as you do. So I think, you know, your form is really good, and watching you is it's been awesome. And then I think the FPO side of things is really, it's a big point. I think the sport is growing massively, isn't it, on the FPO side?
It is. It's crazy. I mean, I remember when I first started touring, my main goal was to get to 950. And now that's not the top marker of, you know, the best in the sport anymore. Now, I mean, Paige Pierce is almost 1,000 rated. So now everyone, like, I'm closer to that 950 goal. But now that I'm closer to it, I'm like, actually, I need to start striving to be 1,000 rated, which is really crazy to say, but I mean, that's where it's headed. So yeah,
So,
crazy
so,
times.
so, so you mentioned, Paige. I think we were really
Yeah.
interested. So, on the MPO side, obviously you talk about the immortal Paul Macbeth, who can
Yeah.
turn over discs which no one else can. But we get the sense that every tournament, every week, there could be anyone winning and taking that title. With Paige on the FPO, it seems a little bit same old story. I think would be fair to say. In no way taking away the achievement. How is the sort of the buzz around the FPO? Does it just drive you guys to say, you know what, there is, like you mentioned, there is this goal that, you know what, we know the person to beat, and let's just go out there and get it done.
Yeah, I think everybody's kind of chasing down Paige because I think she's kind of in this zone, especially last year and this year, where her putt and her drive and her whole game is kind of like working in harmony together. Whereas in previous years, she's always kind of like, her driving has always been amazing, but struggled with the putting, like circle one putts or up shots or whatever. So it hasn't really all been tied together, but I would say she has the most developed all around skill sets. So when all of those things are working at the top level for her, she's really hard to beat.
No, I
So,
agree.
I mean, for myself, I obviously am super competitive, and that's why I compete, and that's what got me into it. But I've really worked hard on pushing all of those competitive things aside, because if you really get down to it, the only thing that you can do is do the best that you can do. And so what others are doing shouldn't affect the way that I'm playing or what I'm thinking and doing, because in the end I can only do as best as my skills allow. So I really just try and, not that I'm not competitive, but I just try and put most of my focus on the things that I actually have control over, and I try not to waste any of my mental energy on things that are out of my control.
It's really interesting you say that, because when me and Rob play, we've always said it's a sport where you're not playing, you are playing against each other, but you're playing against yourself. You
Right.
know, you're the only one that's got control. It's not like you're playing football or soccer from where you are. You know,
Yeah.
you've got your teammates that can make a difference, but in disc golf, it's only you that can make that difference. And if you let the
Right.
pressure get to you, then that's when you're going to crumble.
Yes, yes, that's exactly why I tried to kind of put what you just said. That's why I put more of the competitiveness inside me. I try and push it aside because it makes me crumble when I put too much pressure on myself rather than just getting out of my own way and letting my body do it.
Well, watching a couple of your couple of your rounds, I think it, from what I've noticed, you know, well, one thing I've noticed, and I think it's a really great thing, is you can almost see that frustration leave in the facial expressions that you make. So I can't remember the exact tournament, but you were on a card with Paige Pierce, I think, and you went OB in the lake just right at the basket. I can't remember the exact round, But in your eyes, you kind of had that, oh, that just happened kind of mentality. Then you almost saw your sort of yourself settle back down, and you almost saw the frustration dissipate, which was quite interesting, because I think some people, players in the MPO and FPO, are so wooden with what they do. I think one of my favorite players is Heimberg, because he just sort of,
Oh yeah.
if he chooses not to show emotion or is incapable, but he's amazing to watch for that sort of aspect of his game. But I think what you
He
do is
is.
you show that there is emotion, but you sort of tend to let it go, and that sort of that act of letting it go is kind of visible when you see you maybe picking up that disc that went OB, and equally when you make the putt, it's that overwhelming joy, and then okay, back to focus and onto the next hole.
Oh, I know what you're talking about now. And I remember being really upset because it was my favorite new driver at the time. It was a Hades. I think it was probably a Ledgestone.
Yes.
But
I'd have to.
anyways, that did happen. That had happened at Ledgestone. Oh, that was terrible. But I mean, I actually stole this technique from an article I read that I think it was Tiger Woods or something. And he has, I can't remember the exact rule, but essentially it's like he has like a 10-step rule where he can be mad and let out frustration about like a bad shot. But after he takes 10 steps, he leaves it behind. So I allow myself to get upset to kind of let that energy out. And then I just kind of like push it aside. Like now it's time to go on to the next one type
Nice,
thing.
I like
Amazing.
that.
I've just looked into it, and yeah, so it was a 2020 Ledgestone. So you're on the card with Pierce and Allen and Young. So yeah, I think that hole seemed to be quite a particularly tricky hole as well. So I think you were allowed to let yourself be frustrated. I think 3 of the 4 people on the card went OB on that one. So
It might even be a different hole, but yeah, there's a few water holes on that one. But I was just so upset because the Hades had came out that year. And so I only had maybe like 3 left, and I had gotten a bunch, but just from touring, you play a lot of courses that have water and thick, what is it called? Like thick roughs.
Yep.
Where if you throw in there, yeah. So I had dwindled down to only having a couple of those left. And then when that one went in the water, I almost lost it. I was like, but this is it's coming back full circle. But it was funny when you had mentioned Calvin Heimberg earlier, how you don't know if he's you're talking about how he doesn't really show a lot of emotion. I remember when he won Jonesboro, I was watching the coverage and he won, and I would kind of expect him to be kind of celebrating or something, but he just looks just as serious as if he had lost.
Yeah, he's a funny one.
Yeah.
One thing you must love from last year, Vanessa, is when we got to DGPT, the Pro Tour ending, having that equal payout for MPO and FPO. For me, that was a changing point in the sport. I was incredibly proud to be part of a sport where we've got equal opportunities. I'd love to know what your thoughts were around that as well.
Yeah, it was a big surprise to me because that's never been done before. So I was mainly I'm excited about it in general, but mainly because the Disc Golf Pro Tour Championships were aired on ESPN2. I thought it was a really awesome move for people who are seeing the sport for the first time, or even larger companies who are seeing the sport for the first time, if they're seeing an equal payout and equal opportunity. I feel like that can really mesh with people a lot better than seeing like gender stratification in a new sport. They might have a bad idea about it, but I felt like it was a really good move for any potential new sponsors that are interested in the sport to see that men and women are treated equally.
Yeah, completely get that. And I hope we're going to see more of it this year, with that equal payout, because the sport is equally as hard for both parties. And I think everyone does a great job and pushes it. You've got ball golf and you've got disc golf, but I generally think that in disc golf, we have a better gender equality out there. or gender
Yeah.
equality. It's great to see people, you know, doing as well as they are, including yourself. You know, Discraft Elite Team. I mean, Discraft is my favorite brand out there. Most of my bag is
Nice.
Discraft, but it's great to see people doing such great things. You know, we were speaking to Nate Sexton a couple of weeks back, and there was someone on his YouTube channel that was 15 years old when he first saw her, and she's about to do her first full tour this year, and it's just
Oh
great to see that.
wow.
You put Cynthia Ricotti. She
Oh
sponsored,
yeah, yeah.
So she was on Champs versus Chumps with Nate, and she outdrove Paul Macbeth.
Oh.
4 years later, she's about to do a full tour, and you know, I just think that's such a great thing to see. So maybe Robin, 4 years time, will be on the Pro Tour.
Yeah, there you go.
I think there's a beauty of being involved in a young, like you joke, Dale, and I've got no disillusions of being on in the Pro Tour anytime soon. But I think there is a beauty of being part of a young sport and actually being able to climb through the ranks quite quickly. Obviously, in the UK, we have I'll say football, but soccer. But equally in the NFL, I'm a big supporter of that as well. So, but with that, obviously, the pool is so large of people that are trying to access that sport on a high level that the chances are beyond 1%. I think one thing we have as an opportunity being quite young and a small sport is the opportunities. I think especially in the FPO,
Oh yeah.
it's, you know what, give it a go, because yes, there's stiff competition out there, but there's always room in disc golf currently for more competitions. So there's nothing stopping someone reaching the higher MA levels or even the pro levels. So I think I think there's some exciting developments over the next few years to be
Well,
made.
I
For
feel
sure.
like what's really interesting for people is, or people who are interested in making the jump from being an AM to a potentially touring pro, would be to follow Brody Smith's journey, because he basically did that in a year. He turned, I don't remember what his starting point was. I think it was maybe like 920 or something pretty low, and in 1 year he was able to bring himself up to a scratch player, essentially. I think his rating is 999, but basically
Don't tell him that, because he doesn't like
no.
it.
I can imagine. But I mean, I think it would probably take about a year of a lot of practice to get up to 1,000, and then another year to get the experience out on tour. And then after that, you probably wouldn't have a problem finding sponsors and making money, because if you're not like one of the top 5 players, most of the money that you make isn't going to be from prize money or bonuses. It's going to be from selling discs.
Yep.
So you want to, whether you get them for free or you have to buy them wholesale, whoever your sponsor is, you want to invest like a couple $1,000s into buying discs and making a custom stamp and then selling them while you're on tour. And that's like a really good way to make extra funds.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think Brody's done a great job with the Get Freaky, hasn't he? So he's not Discraft Elite, but
yeah,
the amount of plastic he sells in that zone is mental.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I don't know what they're selling for now, but at one point I saw that they were selling for 250 a piece.
If you have a black one, nearly $1,000.
Wow. I've been wondering, why do people love the black ones so much? Because they're terrible for throwing. You're just going to lose them. And it's just so weird. Like in the last year or two, black discs just boomed.
If you have a black Get Freaky zone with money stamp, game over. That's your mortgage paid.
You can retire.
I know exactly what you mean with black discs, though. I think the one disc in Dale's bag that isn't Discraft is a black destroyer, and every time he gets it out, I know that we're up for a 10-minute search session after his tee shot, because that thing just buries itself and loves to get lost. So,
that's funny. It's like you might as well get a camouflage disc.
Well, one thing I would love to know from you. Obviously, you've been in the FPO and the female game for a few years now, and you've seen it grow. And we would love to know how you think the UK, maybe being a few years behind, might just make a couple of strides to really getting women involved in the game, because there's someone that's a great ambassador over in the UK called Carol Finley, who's building at the Female Bag Tag League and doing wonderful strides. But is there anything we can do as male players to encourage female players? So we when we're allowed, are in a weekend club, and actually we have no female members currently. So do you have any tips that you think, you know what, that's what would attract me to the game, and how we might be able to implement that?
So I think one of the things, or the main thing that scares women or intimidates women from joining male dominated sports is they know that their looks are going to be judged before their skills. And that can be really uncomfortable, especially when you know people are thinking or talking about your body or what you're wearing, and the emphasis is on whether you're pretty enough or skinny enough, or certain body parts are big enough or small enough, and that can be extremely uncomfortable and intimidating. So I think an environment that would make women feel more comfortable is if they are praised more for their skill sets or progress, and comments are made. Keep the comments directed towards them as being athletes and not really on what they look like. I mean, obviously it's human nature to, say stuff like that, but just use discretion and say that in private conversations, and not on public forums online where those women can read that about themselves or whatever. Just basic stuff like that. I know it doesn't sound like a big deal, or you guys probably, like, everyone feels like they already know that, but that is a big problem for women, and that's what prevents them from coming into the sport. So I think if people can just kind of eliminate that problem, then there wouldn't be a reason why women wouldn't want to or wouldn't feel comfortable joining the sport.
I think that's really important. I think that's you couldn't have put any better. I think the UK, I think everyone needs to understand that, everyone's in the sport for the same reason. There shouldn't be a differential just because of other things. I think it should all be about, that skill level.
I'll direct attention directly to the listeners now. So you guys listening to this, you've heard Vanessa. Like, it's all about the game. Let's keep about the game, and let's grow that FPO over in the UK, because I want to see a bigger FPO community over here, and I think if that's the way we're going to do it, let's make sure we get it done.
I really appreciate that you guys are just even what you guys asked right now is really a big thing. I mean, you're making it known that you guys are welcoming and want more women in the sport, and that's like big. That's a huge key right there, just knowing that we're wanted there and people enjoy our company and respect us. I mean, that's everything right there. So thank you guys for that.
Oh no, 100%. We're both massive FPO fans.
Nice.
We love FPO. I've got quite a few Page Pierce soon to have a Vaness Van Dyken meter in the bag.
Yeah.
It means, I think, being advocates, and every weekend, of course, we're going to watch the MPO, but straight after that or straight before it, I'm on the FPO. I want to know what's going on. I want to know who's won that week, because it's just as important. 100%.
Yeah, you guys better be rooting for me even when I'm playing bad all the time. You guys are going to be my...
Don't worry about that. We'll be your cheerleaders.
As long as you root for us when we play bad. It's not covered. That we'll message you and let me know how we got on. But so we're taking up a lot of your time, so we'll let you go in a second. But just beforehand, I wanted to ask a question that we asked Nate when he was on the show, and I think you may have answered it already, so maybe you can just clarify. Okay. So the third episode of the show, we're talking about losing discs. Now it's a part of the game. Could you tell us quickly, is there a time where you've lost a disc that still keeps you up at night? So was it that Hades at Ledgestone, or is there one that...
You guys are bringing it up again? No. Definitely. So, okay, this is a DGA disc, but I'm allowed to throw DGA because Discraft manufactures DGA. But I had a pipeline, which is really similar to Undertaker. And they actually have the same flight numbers, but I feel like pipeline is just ever so slightly more understable. And this year we played the Women's National Championship at Winthrop with the men. And on hole 5, which is the huge water hole, I had a easy shot over the water, like a little turnover. Wasn't that far, maybe 270 feet, just to park it. And that was the perfect disc for that exact line. And there's nothing in the way. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to go for birdie, throw it over the water. And I knew the pipeline would make it. And I released it a little low. And the only obstacle was this little shrub in front of me. And there was like a little thick stick kind of sticking out, and it nicked it and just slowed it down enough and redirected it so it hyzered out, and I lost it forever. And that one keeps me up at night. That exact throw and everything, I remember it so perfectly. And we're not allowed to go in the water at all there because it's on a college campus and they're really strict about us going in the water. I'm not sure why. It's probably some liability issues, but if you go in the water, you can get disqualified from the tournament just for that. So there was literally nothing I could do.
Ouch.
But that's the one.
Well, actually, in the first episode, my first ever disc was a DJ disc. Before I knew anything about brands, it was the worst first disc to play with because it was a one disc only round, and it was a DJ Quake, which is the most overstable mid range I ever threw. So I was wondering why I could only get my shots to go like 30 meters, but before it shot off to out of bounds.
What about you?
My lost disc was I've lost so many, but the one that probably hurt me the most was an X Soft Heat. I said it in our Lost and Found. It went into the water and it was never found again. But I also had a Discmania CD3, which was my favorite ever disc before I sort of started to switch to Discraft, and it was the furthest I've ever thrown it, and it went straight into the water, so never to be found again. But that was on a college or university campus at the same time with the same rules where you can't go in.
Yeah.
So it must be a college thing.
Yeah.
Well, Vanessa, thank you so much for joining us today. We've taken up a quite considerate amount of your time, but we couldn't think of anyone better to chat to on an evening. So we really appreciate it. We hope that we can get.
Oh,
we hope we can get you back on at the end of the season, maybe, and we can talk about how you get on. I know we'll be following week on week, and we can't wait to see how you get on.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. Just let me know. I enjoyed myself, and thank you so much for having me and giving me the opportunity to meet both of you and get to know you. And I'll have to try, and if you guys play any tournaments, I'll look up your PDGA profiles randomly to see how you're doing.
Well, I'm sure you'll you'll definitely get a good laugh out of that. So that's, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, Vaness Van Dyken. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Vanessa, what a hell of a guest. It was great to sit down with her. Genuinely the nicest person you could hope to chat to of an evening. So we were absolutely honoured.
We could have chatted for hours.
Oh, and believe me, that's a slightly edited version. And some of the guests we've got coming up, we've had to cut ourselves short because these pros, you know what, some of them, they're to the point. But some of these guys, when you get them talking and when you get us talking, it just flows, and we don't want to burden you guys with a 2-hour podcast, so we'll do our best to edit and keep the best bits in. So that brings us to the end of the show almost. So I just want to give another shout out to the sponsor of the show, dischub.co.uk. Don't forget that we've got another guest the guest competition on our story on Instagram next week for you, so keep a lookout for that, and you could be winning a £15 voucher. So that's a new bit of plastic for your bag. And as always, they massively support us and what we're doing on the show. So make sure you use code AMSIDE5 for 5% off your next order.
Yes, and every time you use that code and every time you shop with Discub, you're only making this podcast better and helping us, get further and further along. But just before we go, Rob, let's talk about this week's Silver Series event, the Open at Belton. MPO and FPO, who have you got?
I mean, I've said it earlier on the episode. You know who I've got for the MPO, Kaimborg, aka Vinny Heimberg. He's gonna win one of them, and I don't want it to be always the bridesmaid, never the bride story. He's coming in hot. This guy, conditions anything, he's fighting through and he's hitting those top spots. So MPO, Heimberg, put a pin in it. This is his weekend. And then FBO is so hard because you've got to think that Paige Pierce is going to want to fight back and bounce back, and she's got something to prove now from the last weekend. And that can be dangerous. Someone with that kind of drive and mentality can be extremely dangerous out in the course and come out with an amazing show. But is Kona going to be shooting as hot as she has been the last few? I mean, she's got one up on Paige in terms of tournament wins. I'm going to say Paige Pierce. Again, I think she's going to come back with something to prove. And I think that's my guesses. Got Heimberg, MPO, FPO, Paige Pierce.
Okay, so I'm going to change it up this week because I've gone Paul Macbeth every week so far.
You losing faith in Paul Macbeth?
Absolutely never lose faith in Paul Macbeth because I know he'll be up there, second and third. So he'll be in my grip 6 regardless. I'm going to go this week with Clemens, MPO. He had a really good. I think he's throwing well. I think he's got something in him. And Belton, he enjoys Belton. So I'm looking forward to that. FPO, again, I'm going to change it up. I'm going to own Scoggins.
Think she's going to come in with number 2?
I generally think that she's going to come in because we've seen her up there, and I think she's ready to go. She's ready to hit it.
I mean, hitting 2 of the 4 would be amazing for as a comeback story for Owen. So, you know what? If that happens, I'll hand you the prediction win because that's something that I also would love to see. And someone that we'd love to get on the podcast. All of these people we're talking about on the show, we're hoping to have on soon. So if you're listening, guys, this is the place to be.
You know where we are.
But until next time, if we don't see you on the course, we'll see you on the AMP side.